What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Fantasy Football Outpost. I'm Dallas,
I'm Jay.
and we are here with our wide receiver rankings again, trying to get all these busted out for you before your drafts this weekend. We've already uploaded our quarterback rankings and our running backs, and all of this is half PPR. If you are curious, make your adjustments where needed. But we're going to go ahead and kick this thing off.
Our first running back in our top 12 list is Michael Thomas. No huge surprise there for my list. But Dallas, you talk about the number one overall wide receiver.
Yeah, I love when you word it that way because in my rankings he's not. I actually have him as number two, and it's not him at all. I think he does step down to what he did 2 years ago, which was still the one. I just think he's going to have another contender this year for what he did. He was still on an island of his own 2 years ago. I think Devontae Adams has a big year this year. So aside with Michael Thomas, it's just he's going to get fed. I think Emmanuel Sanders may take a little bit, but it's not anything I'm remotely worrying about. In most drafts, especially PPR, I'm still probably drafting Michael Thomas first. But in half PPR, I do think it narrows the gap a little bit between him and Devontae Adams, and that's why I have Adams above because I think he's going to get close to or near the same amount of targets that Michael Thomas gets this year, and I think he's going to have more touchdowns than Michael Thomas has. But we'll get into that with our second. Do you want to add anything else to Michael Thomas? There's not a whole lot to really talk about. He's going to get out and ball out.
Yeah, I mean, he's Michael Thomas. He's going to do the same thing.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and transition to our number two, which is Devontae Adams. I have him at 1. Jay has him at 2. Basically, I'll let you explain why you like him where he is, and then I'll just kind of roll out on him. He's the same boat.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot of extra explain there. I just think with the uncertainty that, I mean, everyone has talked about, right? Not drafting another wide receiver, getting another running back, drafting Jordan. I mean, that's all kind of narrative driven, but I mean, that's also real. I mean, if you listen to the Aaron Rodgers interview about his kind of discontentment about the whole process, I mean, that all of that to me is going to mean just more targets for Adams. I mean, if you want to prove something or show, I'm sure he's going to try to target the other guys on his team. But I don't know if it'll turn into much. I mean, you might see a more balanced week 1 and 2, and then they're going to have a couple drops or make some, I saw some terrible plays last year and just Rodgers being frustrated. And so all that means to me is Adams just kind of dominate again.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. For me with Adams, it's just I have him at my 1 for targets reasons. Like he was saying, there's really no one else there. The next best guy is Allen Lazard, who I actually like, but he's not the target heavy kind of receiver. He's going to get the big plays. I mean, the guy's huge. I mean, he's not going to come in and just start stealing all the targets in the slot or something like that. Had they re-signed a Randall Cobb or something like that, maybe I would have lowered his targets a little bit. But I honestly have him getting close to probably somewhere around the 160 mark in targets. And I think he's going to end up in half PPR. I have him as the 1 because of the fact that the catches aren't going to be as big of a discrepancy between him and Michael Thomas, and I think he's going to have a lot more touchdowns than Michael Thomas. So that's why I have him at 1. But again, it's splitting hairs. Full PPR, I'm going Michael Thomas just because, I mean, you're crazy not to. But I do think the gap is a lot closer. And half PPR, and the great part about Adams is you don't have to really spend quite what you have to on Thomas, but you still have to spend a back of the first round. And if I'm being completely honest with the way I usually draft, I don't end up with either of these guys, but it's just that's where we have them this year, and so that leads us into our third wide receiver, who we actually both agreed exactly on.
yeah, Julio Jones. I mean, if we had to rank my favorite receivers, separate from fantasy finishes, Julio would probably be those 3 are my guys. I don't know if I had him and Hopkins we have a little bit lower, but I think Julio, even though he's getting older, I mean, the guy is just a producer. But that's all I'm going to say. Dallas, tell me more about why you have Julio at 3.
Julio is just one of those guys that's going to get out and get his. It does not matter. You can listen to any interview from any DB in practically the last 15 years, and they all say, some of them hadn't even played against him, and they all say watching film that guy's just an absolute freak. I mean, and he dominates. We've seen it enough. It's just one of those where I think his target volume is going to go up even more this year because of Mohamed Sanu leaving, Austin Hooper leaving, Freeman's gone, and they did fill both the Austin Hooper and the Freeman role, but they did not fill the Mohamed Sanu role. That's now Russell Gage, and I think although I believe in Russell Gage in Dynasty, I don't think he's going to have much of an impact this year, and I am on the Calvin Ridley train that he's going to break out this year as well, but there's 260 vacated targets, and those got to go somewhere, and a lot of them are going to go to talent wise, arguably the best wide receiver in the league, and he's just going to feast and do what he always does.
Yeah, I saw a great Twitter thread today by Ball Blossom. She was talking about people comparing Calvin Ridley to Chris Godwin. She just kind of blew that idea up
Yeah,
about the target. Did you see the target distribution?
I didn't
Uh,
see it, but that's one comparison I've heard multiple times, and unless they're just talking about he's going to break out this year and Godwin did last year, I don't
right.
see the comparison between those two at all.
Yeah, and so she kind of just crushed it. And think about the disparity in targets between, and a lot of them back to what Julio would get, and just Julio, just his dominance. And
Yeah,
Dynasty, we were talking Julio kind of drop him down a few spots, but I mean,
yeah,
this year, probably next year, I mean, you
yeah.
can't go away from that guy.
Yeah, the only way he drops next year is if he lets us down this year. And honestly, like he continues to follow through without even getting touchdowns. I mean, we're still every single year he gets ranked finishes like the fourth or fifth wide receiver, and that's with almost next to no touchdowns. If we finally get the year where he goes out and feasts on those, then I mean, you got a guy who's probably jumping to the one spot just by getting touchdowns. But because of the touchdown work that he doesn't really get, we're going to consistently put him behind those guys that feast in PPR. But Julio Jones is Julio Jones. He's going to get out and do what he does.
Yeah, he's definitely a guy that I typically see Michael Thomas go maybe 1-6, 1-7, and a lot of people are drafting really running back heavy. There's been plenty of leagues to where I've been able to pick up Adams and Julio on that turn, that 112
Yeah.
and 2-1 turn. They're just sitting there, and I'll take that wide receiver one, wide receiver two any day of the week. So just guys you can probably target, especially with those a lot of early running backs being taken.
Yeah, if you're in one of those drafts where people have cleaned house on running back and you at this point you're not getting one of the top dogs. I mean, you take that stack every day of the week. I mean, you're just gonna feast. So we're gonna go ahead and transition to our number 4 here. I have him at number 4. Jay has him at number 5. That is Chris Godwin. Um, I'll let you go ahead and explain. I doubt we view him very much differently, but it's just the way the rankings fell.
Yeah, I mean, our discussion about Tyreek Hill, the next guy, was really. I went back and forth on these two. And ended up putting Godwin just below Hill. But I mean, that's not a knock on Godwin at all, especially with the addition of Brady. I'm by no means a Brady fan, but you got to respect the guy's
Yep.
ability to get the ball to the right guys. And I just think he's really going to capitalize on Godwin's ability. And he's really just going to continue the pace he set last year. He's going to be back healthy. And I think there's going to be a dominant offense this year. So it'd be tough for me to go any way but Godwin there. And even guys who I probably prefer as wide receivers, I just don't see them producing the same way that a Brady Godwin combo is going to do this year.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree. I hate not being able to give you a deep dive analysis because it's pretty straightforward. I mean, Brady loves his slot, and the slot always eats. I mean, you have Edelman, you have Wes Welker. It's always been something that Brady just features. And we'll see on how the rest of the offense lays out. But this is the one part to me that's not even remotely a question mark. It's just Godwin is going to feast because you got two major factors that help this. Brady loves the slot, and the slot receiver in an Arian system feast. And we saw that last year. That's why everybody predicted the Godwin breakout. Was the situation was just built for him to do it. Now he's done it. He's an elite talent, and he's shown that. And I just think in any kind of PPR or half PPR format, you'd be silly not to take him with the top group of wide receivers, regardless of which order you have him. I don't see how he falls out of the top 5, top 6 this year for anybody.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't know what Brady's like long ball is going to look like, and another guy we'll talk about on that team later on, Mike Evans. But I mean, you think about those short intermediate passes that check down or getting rid of it to kind of take care of his health. I see Brady just dumping it to, if not the running back to Godwin, and that's a nice guy to dump a pass off to. He'll turn 7 into 70 really quick. So I just see him having a great year.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to go ahead and roll on to the next one that you mentioned, and that's Tyreek Hill. You have him at 4. I have him at 6. And so I'll go ahead and kick off why I have him a little bit lower because in most people, they have him right there where you got him. And like I said, it's splitting hairs. It's for me, I just think that you still have – it's really more so the guys around him, honestly. It's not anything to do with Hill. I still think he's going to come out and produce like he always does. He's going to do the new joke I always make where he Tyreek Hills his way into a top spot where he's constantly blowing up for 40 points and he turns around and gets you 15. you feel like you're let down, and then you look at your other wide receiver one in a different league, and you got your 15, and you're happy about it. And so it's one of those things where Tyreek Hill, he does what he does every single year, and I don't think there's any reason to down him. He's one of those where the guys around him are what have me and have him at 6, because I'm not as low as a lot of people have made the next guy fall. But Tyreek Hill is also somebody that can finish as the 1, no question. I mean, if he increases his volume at all, his catches are the most valuable in the league. I mean, so fantasy points wise, every catch that he makes, it's just in of the elite guys, it's going to be the most points produced by it because of the yards, and a lot of them are breakaway touchdowns. He does it more than anybody else. So there's really, I can't say anything negative about Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, it's crazy. Actually, after we talked about that whole, Tyreek Hill and it's like kind of the epitome of the boom bust, I went back and looked at his average fantasy points per week, and he was not even in the top 10 in that. So there's definitely that high and low that you get with him. But I mean, as I said in the running back episode, I mean, that I have Tyreek Hill being a more primary option than Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So I'm actually higher on Tyreek and lower on Clyde, because I think they're just really going to pepper him with targets. And I think that high-powered offense is just only going to give you success. And I think with the question marks of Sammy Watkins and whoever else the other random receivers are going to be, I mean, I hope that McCole Hardman has a fantastic year.
I would love for him to become the 2. Yeah, I really would.
That'd be great. I mean, I like McCole, but I mean, he played a lot last year, and I just didn't see it. And so, to me, that question mark really just puts the ball back in Tyreek's hands. So, yeah, I'm excited for a good year.
The thing with McCole is, I mean, if we're all being honest, he was drafted because we thought Tyreek Hill wasn't going to be here. I mean, we thought that he was going to get suspended. They knew what they had in this offense, and they took somebody that does exactly what Tyreek does. And so that's why I don't see a world where. I hope so. I hope he improves his route tree, but I don't see a world where he ever steps onto the field as the 2. They'll throw him out here and there, but unfortunately, you're just going to have another year of Sammy Watkins out there. And, he's going to get us, another 50 points in week 1, and then you got to decide whether you're going to start him. That was just, I got to say, with Sammy Watkins, he's the most frustrating player in fantasy football. He has to be. But not to get too far off topic, Tyreek Hill is going to feast. If he gets more volume, I definitely have him lower than I should, but that being said, we'll go ahead and roll on to our next guy here.
Our number 6 wide receiver is DeAndre Hopkins. I have him at 6 exactly, and Dallas has him at 5. Dallas can kind of kick us off of why you have DeAndre Hopkins at 5 and our collective 6.
Yeah, so he was the reason why Tyreek Hill was down at 6 for me. I didn't have Hopkins falling as far as everyone else. And I say that like people had him falling. Well, in some drafts, I mean, he falls ridiculous. But to me, and this is why I said arguably earlier with Julio, to me, DeAndre Hopkins on a talent-wise is the most talented wide receiver in the NFL based on what he's done with what he's had to work with. I actually just the other day had this research that I put together and found out that his collective average quarterback completion percentage for his career was 59%. And just to show you how just miserable that his quarterbacks have been, and a lot of people was like, well, he's in a new team, it's a new system. Well, one part of having an interchangeable quarterback for most of your career is the same exact effects that happen from changing teams. You have somebody delivering you a ball that you don't have a connection with and that you're not sure of, and he's still balled out. And that's why I'm not worried, because so it's not like he stepped down to like Mitch Trubisky or something like that. He's got Kyler Murray throwing him the ball and a high-powered offense. Now, a lot of people are talking about his targets are going to come down, or his target share is what I've heard is going to come down. His target share is coming down, but he's going to a team that's going to pass more. So it's going to end up balancing out. I think his volume will go down a little bit. I definitely see that. But when I finished my projections for him, I still had him getting like 145 targets, somewhere right around that range, right at 100 catches. And you know what DeAndre Hopkins does when he catches the ball. And so I still think he's going to be a focal point of that offense. Fitzgerald and Kirk, I don't see the Kirk breakout that I've heard a couple people saying. I think you're literally going to have, when I sat him out, he finished with like, I think 1 or 2 points different than he did last year fantasy-wise for Kirk. And I think the team's going to run through DeAndre Hopkins and Kenyon Drake. I don't think you're going to see a whole lot of the wide receivers. I think they're all going to do their part and step up. But I think Hopkins is going to feast once again. He's going into a good system. Even though it's a different system, it definitely could have been worse. And this is one wide receiver that is the definition of quarterback proof. So I think if anything, if anybody's going to be situation proof, it would be him too.
Yeah, I actually kind of looked at it from a tier perspective because I agree with everything you said. And that kind of second tier of receivers for me, Hopkins was the last one that I felt like was set and forget. As you hear the next guy, I think they're gonna have great weeks. But the guys that I don't even actually, I'm never looking at the matchup. I'm just playing this guy automatically. He was kind of that last of that list between the Hill Godwin group.
Yeah,
And so once we go on to the next guys, you can kind of see it's like, well, they'll
yeah,
usually do good. But
yeah,
everything you said about being quarterback proof, I think that the target share might go down a bit, kind of like you say, Dallas. But I don't see that having a huge impact. I mean, I think he'll score
yeah.
more points overall, and then just a high powered offense. So I agree with everything you said about Hopkins.
Yeah, for anybody interested on the analysis part of the side, I had his target share dropping from 33% last year to 25% this year, and I'd still put him at 144 targets. So, but I also have Kyler breaking out like most people do. So that's why I think Hopkins is another smash. I don't think if you see him, I've got him in one draft in the third round, which was just unbelievable for somebody that the last 4 or 5 years has been the number one or number two wide receiver off the board. So, sorry. So our next guy, number 7 here, is Kenny Galladay. I have him at 9. Jay has him at 7. I'll go ahead and let him kick off why he's got him there, and then I'll jump in why I have him a little lower.
Yeah, as you said earlier, with the Hopkins being my last guy, to where there's no thought, just play them every week. Kenny is like my most confident guy after that. That 95% of the time, I'm not really worried about matchup. I'm just playing Kenny. And usually when you're drafting him, you can grab him that third round, give or take in there. And so with that Matthew Stafford coming back, as we mentioned in the quarterback show, I just see that offense just, I mean, really going through him. I'm a big Marvin Jones fan. I know Dallas is too. I think both of them will be usable. I've heard lately that some people were saying like, well, don't draft Galladay, just get Jones six
Right.
rounds later. And I'm like, no, give me Galladay.
Maybe
And both.
that take last year made sense because we hadn't seen the Galladay breakout.
Right.
I mean, we'd seen him have success, but their numbers still ended up close. So that take worked going into last year because I remember it being one that a lot of people said like, don't draft Galladay because you can just get close to the same production 7, 8 rounds later in Marvin Jones. You're not touching Galladay's production with Marvin Jones this year, and that's the thing with I have him down at 9, but it's because the two guys I have in between I'm just a lot higher on. But in a half PPR format, the gap is a lot closer. And Galladay is somebody that year in year out I just couldn't trust. I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure. And then we've seen what happened last year, and now I'm like, I don't see how I can just be out on that anymore. It's just he had I mean, almost as abysmal quarterback play as you can ask for, and still came out and absolutely delivered week in, week out. And I remember having that midseason epiphany where I was like, Galladay's for real. Like he's one of the elite ones, and it was hard for me to adjust my mindset because he was always that guy that I would take every now and then, but I was usually lower on him than everyone else, so I just missed out. And then I wasn't that disappointed. Last year I didn't have him anywhere, and I was disappointed when I got torched by him. And so he's one of those guys that's gonna get his, and he's right there with Tyreek Hill. He's a different style player, but like every single one of his catches is very valuable. So the ones he does get, because he's like he's like a Mike Evans. I mean, he's going to get you those deep catches, and when he connects on them, if he gets you 5 catches in a game, you probably had a smash game out of him. And then you get those games every now and then where they get 7, 8, 9, and you're like, all right, this guy's just feasting. And he's just one of those guys that's going to get his. He's got the perfect quarterback for him too. And you see what he did without Matthew Stafford last year. I'm curious to see what his true ceiling is with a full season with Matthew Stafford. I don't think we know yet, honestly. It could be more of the same. He could just be one of those that produces what he did no matter what. Or he's only scratched the surface, and we're talking about him next year up there in that tier where we're like, yeah, there's no question. I'm taking him week in, week out. And so Galladay is one of those where I'm not really lower on him. It's just more so guys I have ahead of him. He's still going to be a smash.
Yeah, and you mentioned Mike Evans. I always like to almost comp those two together. That Galladay was just like Mike Evans. He just didn't quite know it yet.
Yeah,
And if you watch some old Galladay tape, he reminded me of like a almost like a DK Metcalf
yep,
type thing, kind of a big, strong guy
hmm
that just ran you and kind of showed you out of the way. And if you watch the last couple of years of his tape, he really kind of shifted his game. Similar to say like Terrell Owens late
yep,
games to where
yep,
you couldn't just blow by anybody anymore. You had to be a little more precise with his movement, and so that's really kind of really pushed him up to the next level. And so if he kind of maintains that attention to detail in his movements and creating that separation, then I think he'll be up in that first tier,
yep,
moving towards quasi Julio type
yep,
range to where you're a strong receiver. Not quite in the not I
yeah,
wouldn't say Adams, but I would say like a baby Julio type thing
yeah,
if he continues to excel in that. And so
yeah.
if that guy does that, the next year in the redraft, we draft him even higher than he is.
Yeah, exactly. Right now, it's one of those where, like, because of the tier he's in, he does fall a lot further than the Hopkins, than the Julios. But next year, even though he could still end up being in the same spot as wide receiver 6 or 7, he could be going a lot earlier instead of running backs in between. And that's usually what you see when this second tier breaks off. That's when the third or fourth tier of running backs start going. And then you end up getting great value by the time it gets to you and you're taking a Galladay for where he goes versus the production he's going to give you. He's a smash. I mean, I'm super curious to see what we get with a full season of Stafford, and I think it's one of those where as long as Stafford's there, he's going to be a smash.
Our next wide receiver is DJ Moore. We have him at wide receiver 8. Dallas, you have DJ at 8. I have DJ Moore at 10. You'll talk a little bit about why you have DJ at 8 there.
So I've heard the comparison a million times for Calvin Ridley and Chris Godwin. And like we were talking earlier in the video, I just don't see that comparison. Somebody I do see that comparison for breakout is DJ Moore. We saw almost quite. The reason it doesn't work is because he was a lot better the year prior than what Chris Godwin was the year prior. And so it's not quite as much of a breakout because he kind of already did. But he's somebody that a lot of people are having a lot of question marks around because of the new quarterback, the new coach, the new system. Well, there's the thing, in my personal opinion, compared to what he had last year, those are all positives. I mean, if something didn't change, I would have been worried. So last year, he was getting targets from Kyle Allen, and then I think for like a game or two, it was Will Greer as well. And they weren't the worst possible thing you could have had, but I mean, they weren't the greatest either. And Teddy Bridgewater is somebody who is absolutely built for Christian McCaffrey and DJ Moore. That's why I've not even remotely questioned either of them. He's somebody that a lot like, because people use that as an example all the time with Michael Thomas, where well, he had to deal with Teddy Bridgewater last year. I'm like, Teddy Bridgewater is literally perfect for those kind of guys because he throws quick, accurate, short passes. Now, as down the field, I've pretty much written off Curtis Samuel and Robbie Anderson. Maybe that's unfair of me. One of them might do it, but I think they're just going to split the load to where I don't want either of them. But DJ Moore is somebody that I absolutely can see getting over 100 catches this year. And in any kind of half PPR or full PPR format, that's going to be a smash. I don't have him projected for 100 catches, but I definitely have him projected close. And I just have him feasting this year. And I don't think he's going to have a whole lot of touchdowns. I think he's probably going to get you, 5 or 6. But it's just going to be one of those PPR plays that he's got this floor that is going to be consistent and secure to throw in your lineup every single week. And he's cheap enough in drafts to where you can go that he's been my favorite wide receiver to target when I go running back, which I love to do this year because of the way the wide receivers line up afterwards. And to go in like the third or fourth round and pull DJ Moore as my wide receiver 1, I'm more than content with that, and I can usually do it almost everywhere. Now, his ADP is starting to rise, but he's somebody that in any kind of PPR format, he's going to be absolutely force-fed by a quarterback who specializes in exactly what he needs to thrive in.
Yeah, and I am probably a little bit lower on DJ Moore than others in redraft. I think same thing I said with CEH in our running back episode. We get a little bit of a dynasty bias, kind of anticipating the next 5 years of DJ Moore, whereas just the production in 1 year. But even saying that, I have him at 10. So I'm not low on him at all. I think everything Dallas said about just him getting the volume from Teddy, I completely agree with. I just don't know the guys I have above him. I just don't know with CMC being there. I mean, the year I'm expecting him to have that, like you said, 5 or 6 touchdowns because he won't be that primary guy, which is funny. But he may not be the number one receiver on his team, even
Yeah,
though he's the number one receiver on his team.
yeah.
And that's the only guy really on that list that I can say that for. I mean, the question mark's been about who you ask about, maybe CEH and Tyreek Hill. But other than that, he's going to be the main guy there. And so that's the only reason why I have him a little bit lower, that he's probably the number 2 option in that offense as far as catching the ball. But I'm definitely not low on DJ Moore at all.
Yeah, I mean, I completely understand what you're saying with the may not even be the first receiver on his team. If I'm looking at my projections right now, and I have him only getting 4 more receptions than Christian McCaffrey, and only actually have him getting 20, almost 30 less yards than Christian McCaffrey in the receiving game. So it's one of those where I think the Panthers. I mean, you lock in DJ Moore, you lock in Christian McCaffrey, and then if you want to take a late dart throw on a super flex of Teddy Bridgewater. I personally like him a little bit more than most people do this year, and I believe Jay does too.
Yep.
Just
Okay.
because of the weapons around him, I don't think he's going to have to work that hard to be able to get good week in, week out numbers. I think DJ Moore's situation is perfect for him, and we'll see. I mean, I think I may even have him projected a little bit low on the catch side for what my mind says, but I try to keep things realistic, and so I have him at 93 receptions on the year, and I think he had 99 or 98 last year. So he's somebody that I think is a very, very secure play. There may be, if he ends up finishing lower than where I have him, I think it's going to be because other guys step up, not because he did worse than I thought. So
All right, our number 9 wide receiver is Allen Robinson. I have A Rob at 8. Dallas, for some reason, has A Rob at 11. So I'm going to give him a chance to explain why A Rob is not in the top 10.
So he actually is somebody that it's more, again, I keep coming back to the same thing. It's got guys in front of him that I like, but I also believe in a Anthony Miller breakout this year. I think you're going to see not quite what you saw out of Michael Gallup last year, but I think kind of a dumbed down version of it. I'm pulling up the projections here, and I've got A-Rob just over 1,000 because I have his targets coming down about 20. I have him with like 133, and he got like 159 last year. And all I think it is you're going to have guys, and that could change too, depending on how serious this David Montgomery injury is. But I still had Tariq Cohen getting his. In the receiving, I think he gets like almost 90 targets or something like that. He had over 100. I think he got 108 targets last year. I have him in the 90s range, and I have Montgomery actually increasing a little bit in the receiving as well. But, with this injury coming around, I have no idea, and this could be something where, once again, they're not going to have much choice. Even with an Anthony Miller breakout, they're not going to have much choice. And the main reason why I don't think the Anthony Miller breakout is going to hurt him that bad, that's why I still have him at 11, is because Taylor Gabriel is gone, and that's really where the Anthony Miller breakout's coming from for me. It's not. I don't even have him reaching 900 yards. I still have him in like 860, but he's like a wide receiver 3 flex consistent. Whereas last year he's somebody that you didn't even really think about starting until you had those like 2-3 stretch of games that were really good. So A-Rob for me is just a volume thing. I mean, he's a guy who gets around 62, 63% of his catches, and so you bring his targets down a little bit, it's gonna impact him quite a bit. And so I have him losing about 20. He had 159. I think he's second in the league in targets last year behind Michael Thomas. So I think he's going to come back a little bit. That being said, it depends on how successful the team is. I don't think Nick Foles is an impact here at all. When I did my projections, I firmly believe that the reason they got Nick Foles is because they still believe in Trubisky. I mean, when you have Cam Newton available, you have Tom Brady available, Phillip Rivers available, and you go get the really bad contract from an old quarterback that's really done nothing but been a backup his whole career, that tells me you're not ready to completely write off the guy that you still have. You just want to put some feet to the flame to his feet to kind of make him step up, and that's what the reports have been hearing. Is he looks like another player this year. So in my projections, I actually have Trubisky with 10 games and Foles with 6, and so as opposed to a lot of people's done the 8-8, I think Trubisky wins the job. I don't know if it's going to be good enough to keep it beyond this year, but I think he's going to outperform Foles. And so I kind of gave him a little middle of how poor he was last year and how decent he was the year before. Kind of went in the middle of that for his efficiency, and where I have him being the main quarterback, the way his play style is, it does take Allen Robinson down a slight tier for me. But Allen Robinson is still a smash. He's somebody I get everywhere with his value. So don't hear what I'm not saying. He's still a wide receiver one. I think he's a lock. A lot of people don't even have him as a one. He's somebody we're both high on, but he's somebody that I'm a little bit lower than Jay on. So I'll let Jay explain the upside.
Yeah, there's a couple guys. We mentioned one, DJ Moore, Allen Robinson, and there's one more later on that with Dallas and I in a draft together, we're battling to see who's going to grab them before the other person. So, I mean, the pop quiz is, can you name the third wide receiver for the Bears? Now, Dallas did projections, so he has a little bit of an advantage, but
I doubt anybody watching can. And I don't like saying his name. It's Ted Ginn. So, I mean, and that's if he even ends up being the third. I mean, I've got it right here. If you can name, I mean, technically on the depth chart, it's Cordero Patterson, but he's more of a running back. You got
playing some running back now. Sounds like
you got Ted Ginn, Riley Ridley, Javon Wims, and Darnell Mooney. And honestly, of those, the one with the highest upside to me is probably Ridley or Mooney if they somehow decide to break out. We don't know anything about Mooney where he's a rookie. And then Ridley, I mean, we know his brother. So, I mean, that's basically all it is. And so, honestly, I have a very, very good pitch for Anthony Miller that I've convinced people on. Allen Robinson, that is, I just have him a little bit lower, but he's still a smash, man. I'm not going to talk too negative about him. It's just I think his targets come down a little bit, and that put him behind a couple of guys for me, but he's still a wide receiver one.
Yeah, and so I mean the question marks about the other guys is the reason why I have A-Rob so high, and in everything you've said about the quarterback question, I'm kind of watching some of the beat writers for the Bears, and that Trubisky, excuse me, he's had some bad days, and then they put Foles in, and Foles hasn't. They actually said Foles was just not bad.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like none of that feels good, but I think the one constant, right? You sub in or whatever that works. You're probably going to try to hit your best player.
Yeah.
And so I think it's going to transit to the season to where with the uncertainty or question marks about the quarterback that, Allen Robinson is going to get peppered either way. And he's one of those type of wide receivers that it doesn't really matter who's throwing in the ball. And he's proved that over the years.
Yep.
And so for me, with the question marks about the rest of the offense, I'm not sure about David Montgomery or what that time frame looks like. But at the end of the day, similar to last year to where the offense of the Bears wasn't good, but the percentage of the volume that A-Rob will get, I still like him to be above some of the guys around him. But I agree with Dallas completely. If he fell below the kind of the guys he has him, that wouldn't surprise me at all. If it's just where it's kind of the upside I see for him.
Yeah, I gave him a 28% target share. So, I mean, that's what he finished with last year. And I gave it to him again when I was doing it. I just had their passing total. I think I have them at 482 passing attempts because I had them significantly increasing how much they run the ball. And that, again, may change with this news about David Montgomery. So, like I said, this all kind of falls on that. I think if they go out and get Devonta Freeman, it doesn't change that much for me. But I don't see him even being used more than a week or two. I mean, because the reports now are that David Montgomery is not nearly as serious as we thought, and that he's probably going to be here week 1 at the latest, week 2 or 3. And so that's not going to change my whole overall season. But like I said, I only dropped him 20 targets. That could be the difference. He could get another 5, 6, 7, 8 in those 2 weeks that Montgomery's gone. So it's going to be one of those where, like you said, you wouldn't be surprised if he finished where I had him. I wouldn't be surprised if he finished where you have him or above. I mean, when I did that research on the average quarterback completions, Hopkins was first at 59%. Well, guess who was second? It was Allen Robinson at 60. I mean, barely. I mean, they were decimal points away. It's just been absolutely abysmal what he's had to work with. He's somebody that I have absolutely been pounding my chest over on talent-wise. I believe he's genuinely one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. He's just never had the opportunity with anybody that could actually – I mean, he's had the opportunity. It's just not been great ones because of the people throwing him the ball. So, I mean, don't hesitate with him, especially with his ADP. That's something a lot of people are still unsure about because they don't know the quarterback situation. And like he said, and like everybody's been saying, like it doesn't matter. You're still going to feed your number one guy by a large margin. I like Anthony Miller a lot. I don't think he holds a light to Allen Robinson talent-wise. So it's not one of those where I think anybody's even going to be remotely competing for him. All right, so our number 10 wide receiver is Amari Cooper. I have him at 7. Jay has him at 13. That put him at our wide receiver 10, so I'll go ahead and let you explain why you're low on him, and I'll explain why I'm high, because we're probably a little bit both in both directions on him.
Yeah, I mean, as far as talent, we were talking a little bit before about the route running ability of Amari Cooper. I mean, I'm a huge fan of his ability, but as far as performance, I mean, I had Cooper in a couple of leagues last year. He was in my early picks, and he just kind of crushed me. And so I wanted to kind of break down, okay, what was it that happened? You know, why did this happen? And just looking at his, I saw some posts lately about his ability, you know, when he's double covered and when he's shadowed, and just all this kind of negative analysis of him. And just for me, it's just the inconsistency of him is really what knocked him down. And so all of the guys I have above him, I don't know if they are specifically better wide receivers, just kind of week to week, as I mentioned, when our top six guys that you don't have to think about. And I feel like with Cooper, I have to really think about, okay, do I feel good about starting him, which is crazy as far as for a talented receiver. But he just dropped for me as I looked at how comfortable am I just kind of set it and forget him into my lineup. So I believe in his talent. It's just the guys I have at 12 and 11 and 10. I just think, okay, this guy's definitely going to perform in me. To whereas Cooper, he might give you a goose head week, but not quite have the same upside as say a Tyreek Hill that's going to give you a 40-pointer. You might get 2 or 15 or 0. So that's kind of why I have him lower, even though I believe in his talent.
Yeah, no, I mean, I completely understand what you're saying. Like, the best way to describe what you've had to do with Amari Cooper is close your eyes when you start him and just hope for the best because you didn't really know. And, I mean, that's the problem with guys like him for the way he's performed the last few years is when you had no choice but to start him. You weren't going to bench him because the last thing you wanted was him to have one of those 40-point weeks that he has on your bench. And so, but when he gives you those goose eggs, it kills you. Now, I know the exact reports and articles you were talking about because I actually looked into it myself as well at the beginning of the offseason because I'm somebody as well that was I'm a Cowboys fan, full discrepancy, but I was a Gallup guy. I mean, you can go look at my videos last year where I called to a T the Gallup breakout. I mean, exactly that he was going to end up doing because I saw how amazing he did once Dallas signed him, and I just projected that was going to be the case. And then I saw last year that they actually have a world where they can both coexist and be fine. Um, but that issue was the inconsistency, and I was trying to figure out like what goes wrong. Like how can somebody this talented consistently drop out? And I watched about a 16 or 17-minute video of him going in detail with his route running and what he likes to do and why he takes advantage of so many people. And it's because he moves around the field a lot and he never gives the DB covering him the same look twice. So if he gets a different DB, he can use a look or a takeoff that he's used on a different DB that game, but he will not use the same one twice on the same guy. And so if you go look, that goes and correlates directly with the games he struggles with are the ones where he's A, double covered, and the ones where B, he's shadowed the whole time by an elite corner, like the Darius Slay and the Stephon Gilmore last year. Those are his two worst games when he played up against them. And what happened is he ran out of his different takes because the way he thrives is mixing it up. And that's something that I think because of the Cowboys being able to acquire CeeDee Lamb and with Gallup now being a prominent and then Jarwin's also a great target, you still got Ezekiel Elliott coming out of the back. There's going to be a high-powered offense. I don't see a way where you can double cover or shadow Cooper at any point because if you take Cooper out of the X spot to the Y or put him in the slot, sorry, for those who don't, X is the right side outside receiver, Y is the opposite. And the reason X is usually dominant is because most quarterbacks are right-handed. That's why X is usually your best receiver. And so when you move him from the right side of the field to the left, instead of him going to a DB that's over on the left now, the best guy usually just followed him over there. Well, now you have CeeDee Lamb, who's somebody who is, in my personal opinion, and Jay agrees, the best wide receiver in that class, and he's an elite talent. You're not going to put some random DB3 on him on the outside in the most productive position on the field for wide receivers. Or if you do, it's not going to happen more than once or twice a game because you're going to get burned for it. Because Dak's going to go straight to Lamb, and then they're going to realize, hold on, we need you back over here. You know, we're just going to have to let Amari cook whoever's over there. And so I think the two main factors that cause Amari to struggle and give you those games are gone. And I think you're going to see that this year. And that's why when you look at Cooper, if you eliminate that, he's one of the best receivers in the league, no question. I mean, he's from that year he was signed with Dallas, he's the wide receiver 2 over that last stretch of games. The rest of the year, I mean, he has absolute elite production when he does, but he He balances it out with the awful games. And I don't think you're going to see those this year. I mean, he's going to have down games like everybody else, but I don't think you're going to see those goose eggs. That's one thing. When Dallas signed CeeDee Lamb, I was originally worried about Amari because the Eagles signed Slay, the guy who shut down Cooper. I was like, man, now he's got to go against him twice. I may not be that high on Cooper next year. And then they got Lamb, and I realized, okay, so they're not going to be able to just follow him around everywhere. So I think the worries for Cooper are way down this year. I still don't have him in that elite group. I have him down in that second tier with your Gallaudays, with your Allen Robinsons, with those types of players. But I think with his ADP, this is the first year where, like in years past, you have to draft. If you go running back, you have to draft him as your wide receiver one. And I've never been comfortable with Cooper as my one. This is the year where I'm actually perfectly content with Cooper as my wide receiver one.
Yeah, see, I definitely feel a lot of things you said. It's very perspective driven, right? Because the questions about adding the other pieces, Gallup and then Lamb, those to me knock my Cooper value down just a little bit because I think the offense is a little more spread out. And as you mentioned in the quarterback episode, I'm really high on Zeke this year, and so for me, that I have Zeke being the primary focus on the offense. And for me, as I look at like our rankings, Cooper is one of the most likely people, other than Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, so I don't really count those two because they're kind of a 1A, 1B. He's probably one of the most likely guys to not be the number one receiver at the end of the season. Now, he's the best receiver on his team. I'm really high on Lamb, but I think of this top 12 or 15 receivers, outside of the guy we'll talk about here in a little bit, he's the most likely to me to not even finish the season as a number one receiver because I think Gallup and Lamb are very talented. And so that just adds a little bit more. Yeah, that's a little bit more risk for me. And then again, I have at 13, so I'm not saying he's not a star, but that's one of the things why I have him a little bit lower compared to the other guys.
Yeah, and if you haven't checked out our quarterback episode yet, I have Dak as my number 2 quarterback because I have him getting close to or exceeding 5,000 yards this year. And so it's one of those where if, in my opinion, because he's not going to be double covered and shadowed the whole time, there's so much work going around that he's still going to feast. But in Jay's perspective of it, he has Ezekiel Elliott increasing the rushing work. If that's the case, yeah, absolutely. He's probably going to drop down to the back end of your ones or your beginning of your twos just because there wasn't enough work with all those weapons on that team for him to sustain a wide receiver 7 year like I have him ranked. So mine, I'm just kind of staying consistent with my rankings. I don't want to say, Dak's going to light it up, but Amari's going to be, a wide receiver 2. So, but that being said, it really does depend on how you look at it. If the volume is there, if the volume is there, then it shouldn't really matter with the other weapons. But if it does come down because of Zeke, then absolutely, yeah, he's going to be – I still think I'd be comfortable with him as a 1 because I think security-wise, he's not going to do that whole letting you down when you needed him most thing this year. But the ceiling games won't be as high if the Ezekiel Elliott does end up rushing a lot more and the passing work comes down. But that being said, the main takeaway from all this, from my point of view, is I don't think the goose eggs I think those are a thing of the past now, unless obviously there's injuries, that can happen. But throwing those out the window, I don't think you ever have to worry about a performance goose egg from him just not being able to overcome the guys that's on him, because I don't think he's going to run into the one guy following him around everywhere anymore.
So our number 11 wide receiver is DJ Shark. Dallas, you have him at 12. I have him at 11. So we're pretty close on here. Yeah, we probably have a lot of the same ideas about Shark. So we talk a lot about him this offseason. But go ahead and kind of share out why you have Shark at 11.
Yeah. For me, you can ask Jay. So it wasn't even like a month ago. I put this thread on Twitter that I wanted the fantasy football community to explain to me why I should be higher on Shark, because I honestly had him in the mid back of the wide receiver 2s because maybe I didn't pay enough attention to him, whatever the case was, for why I was insane. That's fine. The light has been shown. Now, to the biggest comparison I've seen over and over again was AJ Green, and that's not even a thought that crossed my mind at any point with him until people started showing me. I didn't even know he was an LSU wide receiver. I just thought he was another guy that came out, did nothing, busted, and then had one good year. And in my past, the way I usually handle those is I'm not sold yet. If somebody's done something bad for year in, year out, and then out of nowhere does great, I'm like, I'm that guy that says, let's pump the brakes for a minute before we jump on board. Well, then I realized, it was only 1 year that he did bad. It wasn't like he's had years like a Devontae Parker where he was bad for 4 or 5 years and then all of a sudden did great. And now let's jump on board like Devontae Parker this year. I'm not jumping on that ship. And so it's one of those where now that I've gotten to see how talented he is, this is a guy that has insane upside. I mean, when you look at his play style, honestly, right now I have him a little bit lower than him, but I see him in the same light as Kenny Galladay. I just think quarterback situation is the reason he's not going to be up there with Kenny Galladay. But talent wise, I think they play very similar. I mean, there are guys that are going to go out and get you. The benefit to Chark, though, is he's not just that guy that goes out and gets on the outside. He can hit those mid-level routes, and that's what helps Gardner Minshew so much with him. And their connection is great. And then to add to the AJ Green comparison, the comparison that kept getting shown to me is that Jay Gruden is now the offensive coordinator, who was also the offensive coordinator for AJ Green back when he feasted in his early years. And he's already been glowing remarks about DJ Chark, about how impressive he is, how much they think they can do with him. And I'm a big Laviska Shenault believer, but I don't think he really impacts Chark in any way, shape, or form. They're two completely different players. And I definitely don't see Conley or Westbrook taken away from Chark. I think Chark is last year was a question mark in this wide receiver core, and this year he's the clear one by a large margin. And I think he's going to be. I think he's going to shock the world on the people who are still sleeping on him because he is probably the single best value in drafts right now when it comes to these top tier wide receivers because he's like a consistent fifth round pick every single time. And that's what I was talking about, like with Amari Cooper, getting him as my one. Or DJ Moore getting him as my one in round 3, I turn right around and get in some drafts I have Chark as my wide receiver 3, and talent wise is through the roof. So I'll let Jay go ahead and expand on that.
Yeah, I mean he's definitely gonna shark the world this year. You know, I see. I had a fortunate pleasure in my home league last year to have this insane wide receiver stack, and so my home league had Michael Thomas, Robert Woods, DJ Shark, Terry McLaurin, and Stephon Diggs. I just lucked out in some drafts, but that gave me the opportunity to kind of watch a lot of Shark tape that I wouldn't have seen it beforehand, and so that really got me into him. And he had a couple of injuries, and I think so. The one thing about Shark is that the early season with Foles, and then the Minshew, and then the Foles again, and then Minshew, it created all of this uncertainty for a younger receiver that didn't allow him to continue that same streak, but he still performed well. And the last couple of weeks to where he was a top 10 wide receiver, then he fell off, he was hurt. And so, I mean, you look at hopefully a full healthy season. I mean, you could consider him borderline elite. I mean, when you look at these young receivers that are going to dominate, we talk about DJ Moore, Chris Godwin. I mean, honestly, in the season, DJ Shark could be one of those guys. And so one of those people that right now, as Dallas said, he's kind of flying under the radar. I think if he's not someone you grab right now, you're going to be on week 2, 3. He's going to blow up, and it's going to be impossible to trade for. So somebody that I'd definitely be targeting. If you can get him as a wide receiver 3 like Dallas, that's going to be insane. You're going to be stacked. But he's a guy I'll definitely run with him in wide receiver 2, or maybe even wide receiver 1 if I'm doing some crazy running back kind of situation. But he's definitely going to be a great value where you can get him in drafts.
Yeah, I actually did that exact scenario you're talking about. It was running back. And then I walked out of there with a guy we're about to mention and him as my wide receiver 1 and 2. And it was just, I mean, he's such a value. He's somebody that, for those of you that have already done your drafts, sorry we missed you, but go get him before the season starts. If you're in a league that allows trades, which if you're not, you need to leave it. If you're in a league that allows trades, go get DJ Chark before the season starts because he will not be obtainable once things get kicked off. Because right now, the guy who drafted him is going to be thinking, well, he's my wide receiver 2, he's my wide receiver 3. I took him in like the 5th. And then you can, beat him the 8th round wide receiver and the 10th round running back you grab just to add depth. And then grab somebody that could immediately impact your team either as he's going to give you wide receiver 1 production, and that's the best part about him is you don't have to take him as your wide receiver 1 ever. And so he's somebody that in every draft, I come out of there with him now. Originally going into the offseason, I didn't. I just wasn't on the DJ Chark train, but I've been full steam ahead now.
Yeah, look at some of those hype guys come to mind. Like Metcalf comes to mind, who I love me some Metcalf, but give me Shark this year that you can trade, you can throw out there for DJ Shark. I mean, he's not going to be a cheap steal, but guys are definitely going to undersell his production, especially being a wide receiver 1. All right, our number 12 wide receiver is Robert Woods. We mentioned earlier the Allen Robinson and the DJ Moore love, but Robert Woods is probably between Dallas and I one of our favorite wide receiver values. But Dallas, talk more about why Robert Woods is our last wide receiver one we have.
Yeah, so Robert Woods for me is somebody that I'm going to go back to this that everybody else is now coming around on with the 12 personnel situation in the Rams offense. One thing I'll kind of just touch on that before I get into Robert Woods is with Cooper Cup, the one that most people have ahead of Robert Woods. I don't think he takes a hit as much as we think because Cooks is now gone. So last year when you've seen Cup come off the field, it's more so now Cup is just going to be over on the Y spot instead of on the left side of the field instead of the slot where he thrives. And so he's still going to get targets, but he's not going to be your absolute feast. But in that scenario, the one guy you didn't have to question at all that never came off the field during the 12 personnel is Robert Woods. And for those of you who don't know what personnels are, the first number represents how many running backs you have on the field, and the second number represents how many tight ends you have on the field. And the number always equals 5 between the three of them. So if you're in 12 personnel, that's one running back, two tight end, and then two wide receivers. If you're in 11, which is what most teams play in, it's one running back, one tight end, three wide receivers. And basically what you've seen a lot last year because of the offensive line struggles, they would have two tight ends out there to help with blocking. That's usually why you do that. And their offensive line, although I made the argument improve because they're all together for another year, they still aren't one of the top elite offensive lines. So I don't see them going away from the 12 personnel. And the one guy that was out there almost every single snap is Robert Woods. And he's somebody that, in my personal opinion, I think he is their wide receiver one, regardless of what the fantasy world thinks. I think he's the first read. I think the plays are drawn to go through him first. And he's one of those that's going to go out and get his regardless if Cooper Kupp has a good year or not, and regardless of what you think on Cooper Kupp. Robert Woods only had what was it like 2 touchdowns last year, and still put up the numbers he did. And I mean, in the type of receiver he is, he's usually somebody with a lot more than that. I mean, not a lot, but I mean, I could see him jumping up to 6, 7, 8, depending on how impressive this offense is, and he's still going to go out and get his on the target side. And I just think he's somebody that, again, is criminally undervalued. He's done it year in, year out, and he's just not a flashy guy, so nobody really thinks about him up there in this elite range. But he's somebody that he was the one I was talking about. I was able to go triple running back, and then I came out of there with Robert Woods and DJ Chark as my wide receiver 1 and 2. And that, I mean, for me, that's a smash because my third running back is good enough. I always try and redraft. If I can do that, I try to make sure my third running back could be at the very least the running back 2 on someone else's team. And if it could be the number 1 on someone else's team, I know I'm really doing well. And then to turn right around and still have 2 of my wide receiver 1s on my team as a 1 and 2, that's just a great punch. And he's just somebody that value-wise, you're going to get an insane amount of production out of him this year.
Yeah, and Dallas mentioned the 12 personnel. One of the big things that for I don't know how the Rams are going to necessarily operate this year, but when you go from 11 personnel, which is the one tight end, 3 wide receivers, and 1 running back, teams will either run their base coverage or nickel coverage or to cover the 3 wide receivers. When you go into 12 personnel, and the Eagles ran this beautifully, it typically looks like a blocking formation, but when you have tight ends that can receive, you kind of put this defense in a position to be focusing on a run type look, so being in their base coverage with linebackers covering both tight ends, but then being able to open up to the receivers on the outside. And so when you think about the Rams running this 12 personnel with, if I'm guessing Everett and Higbee, most likely, if they're able to use that formation to get Woods, that's going to open up some opportunities for a player like Woods to get more plays. And they started to do this. If you watch Hard Knocks, they'll talk about the 12 personnel, and it's going to be this like hot take all summer. But at the end of the day, Robert Woods is going to produce. And with Sean McVay running his mess formations, that I talk about this this in the quarterback episode. They run that flow scheme to open up the outside receiver. And so, depending upon how teams respond to that, if they have Higbee and Everett both healthy, you got to respect both of those guys on the inside, which will open up things for Robert Woods. So, he's going to be a great receiver this year. I definitely grabbed the guy late. He's starting to move up. His ADP starting to move up a little bit as people catch on to him, but it's still lower than it should be. So, definitely great value to have.
Yeah, that's what with that whole 12 personnel. Like, it doesn't matter what the question is, whether they're going to do it or not. Robert Woods is going to be out there, and that's the whole point and why he's the secure wide receiver to go with on this team. Kupp is probably the upside play that has the ceiling of if things fall right, he could finish as the number 3-4 wide receiver because he's consistently held that along a course of a season before he gets hurt. But that being said, Woods is somebody that I genuinely don't care what Kupp ends up doing. I don't see a world where Kupp eats into that. I think Kupp can have his own, or he can just not, and Woods still thrives. Get him everywhere you can. All right, so that's been our top 12 wide receivers. We do have two more guys we want to mention because we felt it's a little disrespectful not to even mention their names, and it's primarily because of me and my rankings, so we're going to go ahead and get into them. The first one is Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen, I'll go ahead and let him explain the upside and where he had him at versus me.
So I had Keenan Allen as my wide receiver 12. So back in, I'm a huge Keenan Allen fan. He's one of my top 3 favorite wide receivers. There's a lot of question marks with the uncertainty of the quarterback situation. Are we Tyrod? Are we Herbert? It's no longer Phillip Rivers, who would just pepper him with targets. And the thing is, guys, I mean, we talked about all these receivers above who are quarterback proof, right? And Keenan Allen is one of the best route runners in the league. So he's going to get open. He's going to get the ball. I don't buy into the huge drop of production with the quarterback questions, because I think if it's Herbert, he's going to be looking for somebody who's going to be open because he's not going to know what to do, and they oftentimes go for that first read, and I can't see. I mean, we got Eckler getting a lot of work out of the backfield, but outside of that, I can't see any reason why Allen isn't the first read, and then so I think he's going to spend a lot of this time in the summer to develop that relationship with Herbert, or if we're starting with Tyrod for the season, and so I'm not way down on Keenan Allen, and so he's going to be definitely a great steal for value, especially he's fallen into like wide receiver 15, 18 range, and I mean that's way he's not scored as a wide receiver 2 in like 4 seasons. So I mean, if you can get him in that range, just to grab him quickly. Definitely if you're doing that kind of, that we talked about, this running back type thing, is definitely a guy I'm considering late there.
Yeah, so Keenan Allen for me, I don't disagree with any of that. I'm right there on board with you. We actually get a lot of flack for it in our leagues when we talk about how, on a talent-wise perspective, Keenan Allen is top 5 wide receiver for both of us. When it comes to his just all-around ability, his route running is through the roof. I have him right there with Amari Cooper, 1A, 1B. He has him a little bit above Amari Cooper, but either way, like however you want to look at it, route running, he's the best in the league. And so he's just, I mean, he's through the roof talented. I have him at 13, so I don't have him dramatically lower. And he's somebody that I wholeheartedly open-ended. He can finish as the wide receiver 3, 4, or 5, 6. It just depends on what the situation ends up being. Tyrod is a smart quarterback. I actually like Tyrod a lot. And so he's somebody that I think regardless is going to end up feeding him. My main concern was actually on the Herbert side, because I don't really know what to expect, because a lot of his tape was down the field. I mean, he's a great down the field passer, and so I don't know how much he's going to utilize. I think he's still going to force feed him because he's the best wide receiver on the team, but I don't know how successful it's going to be. So if there is a world where Keenan Allen doesn't finish as a 1, I think it's because they gave Herbert more play time than we expected. That being said, I mean, the way things are looking right now, Tyrod's probably going to play a significant portion of the season as the starter, unless they just come out early and don't look like a team that competes at all. But right now, you can tell if you're watching Hard Knocks, you can tell their mentality is they're a contending team because of their defense. And so as long as they're a contending team, I think Keenan Allen's pretty much a lock for wide receiver 1. It's more so when they start to dial it back, get a little bit more experimental with Justin Herbert. If they do, I'm curious to see what happens on his target volume. And that's the only thing that knocks him down just a little bit for me past these other guys who I think are a little bit more of a sure thing. But he's one of those guys that when you rank him here, you know you're going to be wrong. It's more so either it's going to fall off a cliff that we didn't see and he's going to drop to that 15, 16 range, And I think I give that like maybe a 5-10% chance of happening. Or I'm going to be wrong. He's going to end up being a wide receiver 6 or 7 like he is every single year, and you're drafting him in the 6th round, which is absolutely ridiculous. He's always been somebody that's been lower than he should have been in drafts, but now it's just been. I mean, it's just not. I mean, I don't even think twice about it. You get to the 6th round, and Keenan Allen sitting there staring in your face. You're literally the guy where you're looking around like, I I didn't realize he was still here. He didn't even cross my mind that he'd be available. But yeah, why not? And you're getting him as your 2, 3, and he's going to be a borderline 1, if not a 1. Even in my projection, I have him as the 13th. So, and that's full disclosure, understanding somebody's probably not going to be there that I have. So he's somebody that is a smash play and at his value. It's just nonsense to have him that low. Even me having him lower, I still think it's absolute nonsense to have him as low as he is.
Yeah, Keenan Allen's another guy that I have to, if Dallas and I are league together, I have to get him before he realizes that Keenan Allen's still there. But
Yeah.
I mean, if Dallas can attest to probably 4 or 5 of my leagues, Keenan Allen is one of my wide receiver 1, and I'm totally okay with that.
And you won't move him at all for anything.
Nope. Unless you're giving me Julio, I'm not moving Keenan Allen.
He's one of those guys like the next one we're about to mention that it's in a weird state right now value wise that it's hard to move him. And we're referencing Dynasty, of course, with this trying to move him around, but
Right.
their situations are they do have question marks around them, and so the person who has them, it makes no sense to trade at the lower value that they have, and the person trying to get him, it is risky to pay what they should be paying for him because you still don't know how it's going to work out. So that's going to segue us into our next guy here.
Next guy is Mike Evans, and I was a reference Dynasty, but probably my most common combo is Keenan Allen and Mike Evans, the misfit wide receivers, and this hatred of Mike Evans that all of a sudden he's no longer elite is wild to me, but it's very common, especially coming in with Tom Brady. And so it's I've heard the conversation about people being high on Godwin because Brady's coming in, and I understand the love for the slot. But then all of a sudden we're now really low on Mike Evans, which is baffling to me. Just like Keenan Allen, he's performed every year with whoever the quarterback was, even back into the Fitz days. So he's performed. And so I have Mike Evans up at 9 because, I mean, the guy's good. He's a great wide receiver. And then according to him, he's better than Michael Thomas. And I think that's spicy. And I love it. Yeah. So Dallas, talk to me about why you have him down at 4 or at
so
17.
The funniest part about this, and it's probably going to spark some more spiciness, is I don't disagree with him on the Michael Thomas thing. But talent-wise, I do have – he's one of the guys that I use as an example all the time. But Mike Evans is, in my opinion, a top 5 talent in the league. He's somebody that if he gets the volume, gets the work, he's going to produce week in, week out. He's one of the best one-on-one guys that you can ask for, which translates to one of the best two-on-one guys that you can get as well. And so – for me, it's 100% situation. I'm one of those guys that has lowered on him because of Tom Brady and because of that system. And a lot of people are like, yeah, but he's had guys like Fitzpatrick. He's had guys like Jameis Winston. And I'm going to use the exact same argument I made for Michael Thomas earlier when I kind of mentioned him during when I was making the argument for DJ Moore. And that was Teddy Bridgewater's the perfect quarterback for them. Jameis Winston and Fitzpatrick are the perfect quarterback for Mike Evans. They're guys who do not care about their interception count, or if they care, they don't show it. And they just air it out. They know it. He's going to get it 50, or honestly, 50 is unfair. He's going to get it 70% of the time on those 50-50 balls. They're not 50-50 with him. They're 70-30 or 80-20. But the problem with that is Mike Evans doesn't lose points for interceptions. That has nothing to do with him. And they continually force feed him over and over and over. If he goes out, they bomb it, 40-yard pass on the field and it's interception, the other team scores, they come right back out. Guess who they throw another 40-yard bomb to over and over again? Tom Brady doesn't do that. He's not the guy that if he goes and he makes a mistake, he usually doesn't dive back into that well until it looks good for him. And that's where I think you're going to see the first step down that you've seen in Mike Evans' career. And I don't think it's going to have anything to do with Mike Evans. I think it's 100% Tom Brady and the type of quarterback he is. He's a smart quarterback, the greatest of all time. He doesn't make mistakes, and that's why Evans is still going to be a high-end wide receiver, but I have him in that wide receiver 2 range because I think his production is just going to come down this year. I mean, he could still maybe see the 1,000, but I honestly see this being the first year he doesn't, and it's strictly because I don't think he gets those. I don't care, just catch it targets, and
Mhm.
that's what he got throughout his entire career thus far with Jameis Winston and Fitzpatrick. And so, unless he starts to expand and do a lot more mid tier, which is absolutely a possibility, you got Tom Brady that has had just about any type of wide receiver you could think of. If he comes to Evans and said, "Look, some of this," because they're watching film together constantly. And he's going to say, "Look, that target you got there, you're not getting that from me because I know that's not going to work majority of the time. It's a great catch by you, but you see how close he was to taking that away. You guys lost the game because of that play. This is a team that's going to try to contend." And so Brady's going to look at those kind of things and say, "Look, I mean, if I turn the ball over here, had you guys not turned that ball over, you guys continue down the field and score, you win that game." And that's the difference between somebody who's going for Super Bowls and somebody who's just trying to get out and do his job, like Winston, and just, I mean, he put up what, 5,000 yards last year. I mean, so I think Tom Brady's going to be a lot more decisive of a quarterback, and you're going to see those deep targets come down significantly for Evans. But I still think he's going to do well when he gets them because they're all going to be good looks because Tom Brady doesn't throw bad ones usually. And so if he expands and Tom Brady's sitting there telling him, like, "Look, instead of going all the way on this one, let's cut back, and on this one, when we draw up this play, let's have you run a different route here that's going to get you open." And if that's the case, already know Brady's going to throw him open. And so that, I think, is the clearest path to me being wrong on Evans because talent wise, I think he can change up his game to start doing those kind of things. And if he does, I'm wholeheartedly admitting I'm going to be completely wrong on Mike Evans. But if nothing changes in this system and he still plays the same role that he has, I don't see a world where him and Tom Brady are this match made in heaven, that he just continues to get his production, because I think he's benefited heavily from having quarterbacks who do not care and just throw it to him regardless. And that's kind of my whole take on Evans. It is not an Evans down. I've heard genuine arguments from people saying Evans just isn't going to do that good because they're just not that great. And I'm like, how can you ever talk about Evans in the light of not being exceptional? He is one of the best wide receivers in the league. I think if you put him literally almost anywhere else this year, he would thrive. He's just maybe New Orleans is the only other place where I really wouldn't like Mike Evans. But I mean, you put him anywhere else, like down in Dallas. I mean, good God, if he was in Dallas, like you put him in Detroit, where Kenny Galladay is in that same position, like you get these quarterbacks that are going to air it out. I mean, right. He's going to thrive. I mean, Miami, let him go join up with Fitz again, But yeah, that being said, he's going to be a focal part of the team, a very important part of the offense. That's why the coaches speak where he's still a big part. Like, that does nothing for me because I know he's going to be. It just really depends on how much they change up his play style. And if he continues with being the primary downfield threat, that's just not somebody I see Brady at this point in his career utilizing as much as he should. And so I see a significant step down, and that's why I have him down at 17.
I just thought of my my little spicy take for the day, based on your thoughts here. Nick Chubb and Mike Evans are like the same, right?
Yeah.
It's like this talented guy with a whole with the ability to be this top tier.
Yeah.
But they got another guy that's also really good around them. But you kind of have to make this. You got to make this choice if you want them at that ceiling, because you're not going to get them at that. Like, you're not going to get Mike Evans at wide receiver 17.
No, and that's why I don't have him anywhere. Because he's still going at like wide receiver 8 or 9, and I mean, because a lot of people have done the narrative of, well, he just got the greatest quarterback of all time. That's way better than Jameis Winston, and I think that is a little bit lazy because of looking at how the play style is. I've been one that's planted the flag that Jameis Winston and Fitzpatrick are perfect for Mike Evans because, like I said, he doesn't lose points for interceptions, and there were a lot of those.
Yeah, I typically I'm not never going to reach for Mike Evans. There's a lot of guys around there that I'm always happy with the wide receivers late. But like I say, if he's going off like our rankings at wide receiver 14 or 16, if I see the guys if I see OBJ on the board, I'm taking Evans over OBJ.
Oh yeah.
And then maybe Juju, depends upon how you feel on Juju.
I would take him over Evans.
Juju. So I have him as my ninth ranked wide receiver, but it kind of depends on how the board's playing. If I'm in a more studious league, they're probably letting him sit there. But a lot of times he's gone pretty early at top 6-8 wide receiver, which as a Mike Evans truth, though, that's still pretty high for me, especially with all the question marks that you've mentioned that I completely agree with.
Yeah, and that's what I was about to say is like you've probably been able to get him anywhere and everywhere you want in Dynasty, but in redraft he's somebody that's very difficult to get a hold of because, I mean, it's a 1 year thing. We have no idea, and even you don't see him as the wide receiver 5 or 6.
Right.
Upside, what he finished as like the 5 last year, I think, because of his
Yeah.
upside. Those huge games that he had. I mean, even you don't see that as being a possibility, and that's why he's still going at 7 or 8. And but like you said, in the leagues where a lot more people have done more research into it, he has slipped down into that round. I mean, he was the guy I drafted last year. I mean, I got him. I went running back, and I got Evans. And then if my buddy's watching this, he got absolutely finessed when I sent him Mike Evans and Matt Breida for DeAndre Hopkins because Hopkins was struggling, and then that pushed me straight into the championship. But at the time, Evans was in that middle of him dropping like 40 bombers, like constantly. And
Yep.
Godwin, because I remember, I think it was my wife that had Godwin and I had Evans. It was the most frustrating thing in the world when I'd see Evans absolutely Godwin absolutely feast, and then Evans would do nothing, and I was like, "You've got to be kidding me!" But I don't see that as much this year. I think they're going to figure out the balance there. I don't think you're see the whole teeter totter where one does good and the other does bad. I think it's just really going to fall on Brady. I mean, everything depends on Brady, in my opinion. All right, guys, thank you so much. That's been our wide receiver rankings episode. Hopefully, you guys have enjoyed it. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at DallasFFO and at Pick on the Block. I've officially got our official Twitter for the channel as well. It's at the FF Outpost. It's on there as well. Make sure you go follow it for any kind of uploads. We plan on breaking some of these down with smaller segments in them. You know, like me being low on Lamar Jackson, or the explanation on the Mike Evans situation might be another good one that you may see as a standalone take. But basically, keep an eye out on our Twitters. If you want to reach out to us, give us any feedback. We usually are pretty quick on there. Leave any comments below. And thank you guys for tuning in. If you haven't checked out the quarterbacks or running back, go check out those. And you got the tight ends coming up next. So make sure you guys check that out. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you.
See you guys. The end.
You got the tight.
That's when you just wave.
So,
You know, I tell people, like, just wave.